Mars, a planet that's captured our attention for eons with its 24-hour days, polar ice caps, multiple seasons, volcanoes and canyons, and weather cycles extremely similar to Earth's also. However, while that appeal to colonize Mars by NASA and tech billionaires such as Elon Musk remains strong, ask any gamer in the room, and they'll probably tell you that sounds like a remarkably bad idea.
Initial reports indicated it was a ghost train.
First Doom, back in 1993, showed us that the very gates to hell exist on Mars, a plotline that was expanded greatly upon in 2004's Doom 3, as well as Mass Effect failing to give Mars the Hawaii treatment either. So whether it be video games or movies, it seems, one thing remains true, that we should give Mars as wide a berth as possible. So what could be even scarier than fighting literal demons in a first-person shooter set on Mars, I hear you say? Well, today, we're about to find out as we play through 2001's PS1 port of Martian Gothic Unification, a survival horror game that styles itself as the Resident Evil in space we never knew we needed. So strap in, and remember, unlike Raccoon City, in space no one can hear you scream. Martian Gothic Unification first released for Microsoft Windows in April 2000, and came out a little over a year later on the PlayStation 1, a release that created very little fanfare, as the PlayStation 2 had already been out for a year at that point in both North America and Europe. Initially, the team over at Creative Reality were aiming for a point-click style adventure in space, a design choice that still feels at home in many sections of the game. However, that point-click idea was scrapped mid-development as the far more popular survival horror genre was experiencing its golden age during the late 90s to early 2000s, and the team over at Creative wanted to try and tap in. Despite the limited budget and tight time frame imposed on Creative Reality by publishers Talonsoft and later Take-Two Interactive for the PlayStation port, Martian Gothic Unification nevertheless had ambitions of being something far greater. Firstly, they had acclaimed science fiction writer Stephen Marley on board to set the tone and pacing of the overall plot, with Marley designing a lot of the character script as well. Secondly, it's Resident Evil in space, in case you missed that fact first time around.
Shut up and take my money!
To show just how popular this concept could be given a generous budget and an effective release window, less than a decade later, Dead Space went on to critical and commercial success, selling over 2 million units during its initial run, producing 2 sequels, the second of which was a massive success when it launched, and going on to inspire a 2023 reboot also, which matched those initial sales figures from 15 years prior. So where exactly did it all go wrong for Martian Gothic Unification, given the demand for this type of game was already clearly there? That's what we're about to find out today, ladies and gentlemen, as we delve into Martian Gothic's control scheme, characters, mechanics, and story elements, trying to determine whether this game is indeed a lost PS1 gem, or whether it should have been left on the dust dunes of Mars. Let's find out. Now, before we get into the story, gameplay, and all the rest of that other good stuff, if you're enjoying what we do here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, as it helps us out a ton, and, as always, thank you for taking the time to watch. And now, back to the video. Okay, so spoilers ahead, and if you haven't yet played Martian Gothic Unification, and wish to try it out for yourself, I have no idea why it's taken you 24 years to do that, but to each his own. Then you might want to skip ahead to the conclusion section at the end of this video to find out what my final thoughts are on this game. So, as you're no doubt aware by now, Martian Gothic Unification takes place on Mars in the year 2019.
Where? Back to the future!
The mega-corporation Earth Control have built numerous bases on Mars, with their first and largest, Vita Base 01, having gone radio silent for the past 10 months. Obviously, that's not good, so 3 team members are dispatched on the 9-month journey to Mars to find out what exactly has been going on inside the base, and if it's nefarious, to put an end to it. Those members include American security officer Martin Karn, British medical scientist Diane Matlock, and Japanese infomesher/hacker Kenzo Uji. Let's take a look at the fantastic opening cutscene of this game.
I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space, were it not that I have bad dreams. 4 centuries have passed since those words were written. We have begun to penetrate infinite space, bounded in our little nutshell spacecraft. But we still have our bad dreams. I can sense them coming across the midnight of space and read the cryptic circuitry of their ship, decipher all the codes of fear in the hearts of its crew of 3. I wish I could tell them that all will be well, that the future, after all, is not so terrible. But that is not in my nature. They're very near now, the 3 in the ship. I know each name, each individual pain. Khan, Matlock, Kenzo. 3 are coming. Only 2 will leave. The bad dreams will always be with us. And now and again, dreams come true.
Now that's what I call a great intro. The 3 astronauts are given one very explicit warning from the last transmission sent from the base. Namely, to stay alone, stay alive. That warning alone sets up a fascinating premise for the game, as its opening scene shows the 3 heading into separate airlocks within the base in order to avoid contact with one another. And with their ship crash landing onto the planet's surface due to the malfunctioning automated landing system, they now have no way back either. One of the few criticisms writer Stephen Marley had with the first Resident Evil game, despite its legendary status, was that the player was forced to fight through hordes of zombies. Giant snakes, mutant spiders, hunters, you name it, as well as the dreaded tyrant itself. Yet going back and escaping through the front door was somehow deemed too dangerous because of a few dogs. That dilemma is of no concern here, however, as with a damaged craft and no air supply, the 3 main characters of Martian Gothic Unification are well and truly trapped with no way out, so have no choice but to soldier on willingly, or indeed unwillingly, to determine what exactly has gone wrong on Vita Base 01. The 3 characters in question, Martin, Diane, and Kenzo, can be switched between at any time during the game, an interesting plot mechanic that really hadn't been seen all that much in video games. Since the days of Maniac Mansion back in the 1980s, and one that definitely highlights Martian Gothic Unification's point-click origins. One of the main hangovers from that change to a survival horror game, however, meant that a lot of the point-click stuff from the original concept idea remained left in, with so many useless items cluttering up your limited inventory space that it really does present a frustrating ordeal to those looking for a more streamlined survival horror experience that titles such as Resident Evil or Silent Hill offered. While some reviewers have stated that the extra superfluous items you find throughout the base do give the game a certain tone of realism, with Kenzo carrying around cheat codes for video games, for instance, Diane carrying around her lipstick, and perhaps most grimly, Martin carrying around his empty candy wrapper.
Wrapper from an old-maid country cottage candy bar. I could lick off what's left, but I'm not that kind of guy.
However, what actually ends up happening is that you're forced to carry a lot of the game's extra stuff around, never quite sure of what will come in useful at a later date and what is effectively trash, with the numerous micro-recorders, notes, and toys clogging up your inventory space at a rapid rate. And with no way to simply drop items on the ground either, like in Resident Evil 0, you're forced instead to hunt around constantly for the few drop boxes available in order to free up space from your ever-expanding inventory of clutter. From the airlocks, you'll quickly find out that only one character has the ability to leave, that being Kenzo. So leave Martin and Diane on lockdown for the moment as you go and wander the base with Kenzo. As you gingerly step out into the base proper, you quickly determine that something is definitely not right, with dead bodies being left in the hallway and an eerie silence that pervades the entire base.
Corridor after corridor, not a living soul, shadows and echoes. This is a haunted house on Mars.
From the junction, Kenzo will quickly stumble upon base director Antonio Felici's corpse, picking up the first of the colored door tags along the way. This tag happens to open up the base director's quarters just down the hall, with an unearthly floating man positioned right outside, thankfully harmless at this point. As the player, you can gain a lot of the backstory of this game from the computer in this room, with numerous files and logs detailing the current state of the world and all of the major players in it. Kenzo will find an emergency transmission on this computer also from project director Judith Haraway, where she talks about opening Pandora's box deep in the Martian mines and the subsequent horrors it released. When you're finished with the additional info dump, go ahead and unlock Karn's airlock door, with matlocks being locked down for now via passcode. Be on the quick side, however, as the sleeping girl who lay quietly on the bed just moments ago as you first entered the room now sits up to officially become the first enemy in the game. Once outside, head through the corridors to Sunset Blood, with all of the corridors and passageways in the game being named after famous landmark streets. A nice touch, and one that honestly adds a lot of depth and realism to the game. Now, while the plot does do a great job of sucking you in at this early point of the game, at least it did me, you're quickly brought back down to earth when trying to control the damn characters in this game, with the control scheme easily being one of the most frustrating and unwieldy experiences I've ever had the pleasure of playing. It's honestly incredible also that this released almost 5 years after the original Resident Evil on PS1. 5 years, and this hot garbage was the best that they could come up with? It's like playing Resident Evil while someone's simultaneously kicking you in the nuts and pouring sand into your eyeballs.
Make it stop!
We eventually soldier on to reach the vac tube near the end of the main corridor, and have Kenzo wait there while we go ahead and switch to Karn. It's extremely important to leave characters in safe spots in this game also while you're switching between characters. Leaving your other characters in vulnerable locations while you're off playing as someone else can, and often will, end in a game over screen. Sayonara. Another interesting addition to the game are the vac tubes, which present the main method of transferring items between the various player characters. And it's a good idea to try and remember where these are located, also as you'll be using these a lot throughout the campaign. Once you escape the airlock with Karn, he quickly realizes that his watch has stopped, as indeed have all the characters' watches, with a passcode message being sent out by the game's unofficial fourth character, Mood, the station's artificial intelligence. When Karn comes upon a locked dropped box not long after, he goes ahead and tries the static code frozen on his watch and discovers that it works, enabling him to grab the second colored door tag of the game. These door tags will start to become a lot more numerous. So go ahead and send that green one you just found over to Kenzo on Sunset Boulevard so he can use it to open up the gymnasium, with a grim sight awaiting us upon arrival. Dieta Mentz, an old university friend of Diane Matlock's, is left hanging quite literally, and it's these sorts of moments in Martian Gothic, along with Mentz's accompanying micro-recorder message, that add a ton of weight to the narrative and plot, taking the fairly rudimentary, itchy, tasty dialogue of the original Resident Evil and adding far more emotional weight to proceedings. Once all of the items have been picked up in this room, not forgetting about the trusty space hopper near the door, you're off to the washroom to pick up the Vibro Scour, an extremely important item which, unbeknownst to me at the time, had me stumped for literal hours as to where exactly to use it. More grisly sights are on offer in this part of the game, and when we're finally done freshening up in the washroom, it's time to switch back over to Karn and head for recreation. In this room, Karn comes across a few important items that we'll need later in the game, including the pop gun, plus a music box that plays the children's song Three Blind Mice.
I'm terrified.
From there, it's off to the study to check out some of the restricted files that we couldn't get access to earlier, using the watch codes Mood sent us. Some of the information contained within about the characters' various personalities are fairly revealing also. Once we get up to leave this room, however, the body next to the computer, previously holding the large book, will rise also and attempt to attack us. That book is the Book of Kepri, an extremely important plot item that we'll need to come back for later in the game, hopefully when we're better equipped. From the study, it's time to visit the Arboretum, one of the single biggest areas in the entire game, and one that holds a ton of items also, This will probably be the first time in the game for a lot of players that they will start to reach maximum capacity in their inventory and become completely overwhelmed with items, having to endure multiple trips back and forth between drop boxes in order to try and free up space. Normally, as in the original Resident Evil's case, that is nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Yet here in Martian Gothic, it can quickly lead to a game over. On my first playthrough of this game, while I was still trying to figure out the map, enemy placement, and drop box locations, having to endure multiple runs back and forth through the cramped hallways and corridors of the base, just to unload some of my inventory, eventually ended up soft blocking me, reaching a stage at one point of having 0 ammo or health, and sandwiched in the mood chamber with Kenzo as old pal Antonio Felici popped up and continually chowed down on my neck, as he blocked the only available exit from the room. The issue with trying to figure things out in the game is the mechanics just won't let you. The pea-shooting piccolo, which is basically your only weapon for a large part of the opening act, is referenced by Khan early on as good for only belonging in a woman's handbag. Gotta love the late 90s machismo with that one. This BB-powered fart gun absolutely chews through bullets, often taking 7 to 10 shots to down a single opponent. Because of that, ammo eventually becomes scarce in the early game, plentiful in the mid to late game, but not at this early stage, and unless you know exactly where you are going and where the drop boxes are located. Then you'll no doubt be running around aimlessly just as I was, trying to free up inventory space from the endless amount of clutter you're flooded with, which becomes an even bigger problem when the bodies rise once again, pretty much every 5 minutes, to continually block your path. This won't stay dead feature is compounded threefold, as the hallways are often so tight that there's simply no way to avoid the zombies, not even having a melee weapon to defend yourself, and a way in which to conserve ammo also. A feature which Resident Evil had, that enabled you to throw the zombie back far enough once you were attacked so that you could run around them, simply doesn't exist in Martian Gothic Unification, and it becomes a frustrating mess of emptying entire clips into opponents, only to see them standing right there in front of you once again after just a few short minutes. Run number 2 coming up. Returning to the Arboretum, Karn picks up a gun from a zombie on a bench, one of the few places in the game that you can actually outmaneuver the undead. From there, Karn and the player get their first look at a trimorph, one of the main antagonists in the game, and also one of the most difficult. Circling east from the recycling center has us run into yet another zombie, a rather important one as it turns out, as he has the code to free our third playable character, Diane Matlock. Once Khan acquires the code, he heads back inside the base, and it's really from this point of the game on that the training wheels well and truly come off. Almost all of the zombies in the base come alive at this point, and it's imperative that you leave Karn, Kenzo, and Matlock in safe locations while switching characters. Kenzo's once again in charge of freeing Matlock.
Your door should be opening now, Matlock. See you soon.
Just put her back in her room.
Once Matlock is free, she quickly finds the body of Yuri Andreevich, a rogue scientist who intended to scupper Operation Akarak, an operation we've previously read about on the computer files with a bomb blast right before his death. Opposite Andreevich and ChemLab lies MedLab, one of the most useful locations in the entire game, as this is where you can finally turn all those herbs and lichen you've been finding into actual health items, and antitoxins using the chemical extractor on display. With Matlock safely tucked away in MedLab, we can switch back to Karn and open the shed we saw earlier inside the Arboretum using the hacksaw. Inside the shed, we can find a weed killer gun, which is going to come in incredibly handy in the very near future. With the weed killer gun in tow, Karn sends over the empty cartridge to Matlock to fill up with hydrochloric acid, before then proceeding to take down the game's first trimorph.
I like the way you scream.
Badass, 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 badass.
After getting rid of the trimorph, Karn now has access to the air recycling center, and one of the most insanely difficult puzzles in the entire game. The issue with this whole segment is that the game doesn't present it as a puzzle, yet it is essential for moving further on in the base. Turns out what you need to do here is actually climb in behind the computer and clean the dirty filter by hand, using the vibroscour we found earlier. How you're even supposed to know this, or indeed have the required mental gymnastics in order to reach this conclusion, is anyone's guess, especially in what's supposed to be a survival horror game. Just another symptom of this game's former life as a point-and-click adventure. So after that spot of spring cleaning, it's back to Kenzo once again to try and find his way into the mood chamber and finally get some answers as to what exactly started this whole mess in the first place. Before we head off to grill the station AI, however, Kenzo manages to pick up a cool little RC buggy that proves itself extremely useful throughout the rest of the game, as it's able to zip under the notice of both the undead and the trimorphs to deliver ammo, healing items, and door tags to your other squad mates. When we finally get to use the yellow tag to open up the mood chamber, the hallway starts to decompress fast, and Kenzo only has a limited amount of time before the oxygen completely runs out. Bet you thought that Mars Hopper we picked up in the gym earlier was useless, huh? Not so. Go ahead and stick that 1970s stocking filler into the breech and make sure to pump it up, as we get ready to talk to Mood in the base's central core. Upon entering Mood's chamber, all seems relatively quiet, with Mood in seemingly no mood to talk, no pun. It turns out she's running on empty after 10 months in solitude, and tasks you with charging up her power core in order to get the required information. Now, as I said previously, this is where my first run-through of the game ended, as I was unable to exit the mood chamber, having 0 bullets or health items left at this point after backtracking through the station so many times to unload inventory that I was completely depleted. Why didn't I use the buggy, you might ask, after I literally just mentioned that that's what its main function is, namely delivering ammo and health to drained squad mates? Well, the bulkheads in the base are still locked down at this point, effectively rendering the buggy useless until Mood can open them. Matlock needs to blow open a hole into the main power core using the nitro solution we made back in Chem Lab. Once the formula's been mixed, combine it with an oily rag, and voila, instant hole. Celebrations might be premature. However, as it turns out, the receptor panel on the power core is fingerprint locked. So, where do we get fingerprints from, I hear you ask? Well, it involves some Donnie Brasco moves. Switch back over to Kenzo and start doing your best Sonny Black impression.
What am I doing? This is really horrible.
Grim. Once Matlock has the severed hand, she fixes the panel and we can finally power up Mood to get the answers we seek. Thankfully, Mood is far more talkative on the second attempt, and it's honestly worth exhausting all of her answers here because this is where the game really shines, in its story, world, and atmosphere. After getting the information you want from Mood, strap Kenzo into the infomesher's chair and get ready to be transported back to 2019 Tokyo, the same area we saw from the picture of Kenzo's house back at the start of the game. Kenzo now has full control of all the bulkheads, a useful skill as we'll come to learn, but one that also means we'll now need to be incredibly careful to avoid any of our characters bumping into one another, as it will present an instant game over. Kenzo goes ahead and raises the station's bulkheads, with Matlock making her way over to the shuttle bay to see if there is any way off the station. Unfortunately, once there, Mood informs us that our 3 protagonists have also been infected with the same virus that the colonists have. Wonder how that happened.
Decontamination sequence completed.
I feel more contaminated now than I did before. So much for the decon thing.
So any chance at escape will have to wait until the infection is cured. Matlock sends over the welding torch she finds in the shuttle bay to Karn so he can cut his way into the kitchen with the mysterious Ben Gunn awaiting us inside. Ben is strange to say the least. It would be hard not to be in fairness given all that's happened on the station, yet he will give you the highly important red door tag around his neck if you offer him a pumice stone in exchange. After we get the pumice stone for Ben using Kenzo, who runs into another trimorph on the way, Ben will then give us the red door tag, which Matlock can use to open Geolabs right across from her location. Despite all of Martian Gothic Unification's many flaws, it is in rooms like Geolab where it truly shines. Spooky alien statues, solid puzzle design, eerie psychic pulses, And it's in these elements where you feel the massive impact that Martian Gothic Unification had on future generations of games, Dead Space in particular, with its markers, necromorphs instead of trimorphs, and foreboding atmosphere of deep space. This might be a hard sell, given all of the previous criticisms I have leveled at this game, but the psychic showdown with the statue in Geolab is honestly up there with the very best of what Resident Evil had to offer on this same system. Matlock needs to shut down the psychic resonance from the statue as quickly as possible, do it damaging your squad continuously with its pulses and, using the Martian rocks we found earlier, as well as the rock cutter and an RC buggy. Matlock finally manages to shut the psionic pulse down, yet it's clear that these artifacts are where most of the trouble appears to be emanating from. From there, we need to head over to Biolab and cut our way through the trimorphic web of the poor animals that used to occupy these cages and head into the back. A Dr. Farr was attempting to create an antidote to the virus in this room, but unfortunately went mad before he could finish his project. A crazy guy roaming the base, you say? Sounds suspiciously like someone we've already met. It's on to the director's office from here, a place we have to get to through the ventilation shaft of a nearby workers' room, and we're chased down by one of the dreaded trimorphs during this segment, the second such occurrence in the game, and one that thankfully Kenzo once again helps us to outwit. Inside Project Director Judith Haraway's office, the woman who's been filling us in via those computer audio logs all this time, we find her corpse on the bed plus a detailed message left on her computer also. Something that only Karn can fully get access to. Strap in because this is a long one.
Voice password required.
Martin, Judith.
Computer accessed.
August the 8th, 2018. We're opening the sarcophagus today. Nobody's celebrating. Some of the guns are missing from the storerooms. I knew that shipment of weapons would cause trouble. In the washroom, a few minutes ago, I looked in the mirror and saw a figure standing behind me. The reflection at my back was the image of myself, Judith, standing behind Judith. She held out her arms and said, "Be with us." When I turned round, she was gone. The strange thing is, I took it all in my stride. It's a few minutes past midnight. We shifted the lid of the sarcophagus, and all the old evils of Mars stormed out of that stone tomb. Pandora's box is open, and there's no hope, or none that I can see. I watched people clumping together, 3 in 1, 3-fold beings, abominations. They tore into the rest of us, utter carnage. Some of the crew went mad, firing wildly. The bullets didn't stop the creatures, but they did a lot of damage to human beings. I've always hated guns. An hour's gone by now, and I'm still sitting here in my quarters, staring at the door. The base has gone very quiet. Maybe those creatures have become dormant. It seems as though I'm the only one left alive. Of course, there's the knocking on the door, and the voice asking for admittance. That's not the voice of a living man. Time passes. The dead are still knocking on the door, calling my name. I won't listen to them. I keep hearing only one voice, seeing one face. Yours, Martin. If you ever hear this, and I have a feeling you will, I just want to say that it wasn't your fault he died. I should never have walked out on you. Martin, I miss you. And as for that blue planet you walk on that is so, so precious to me right now, help keep it safe, Martin. There's a threat coming to Earth from its own cold regions, a threat codenamed Thule. Something's just come in. The door's securely locked, but I'd forgotten about the duct panel. I always wondered whether I'd face death with courage. Now I'm about to find out. All that's left to say is goodbye. Judith Haraway, signing off.
Pretty heavy stuff. From there, it's off to the Kremlin. And yet another game over for yours truly as we attempt to solve yet another asinine puzzle. After my brief praise for Geolabs, it seems we're back to awful game design as it turns out we need to have two characters in this room at the same time, something we've been told explicitly not to do the entire game. Once you figure that part out, one of your characters needs to have the pop gun equipped, a seemingly useless item from back at the start of the game, and one that I had to go Dropbox hunting for as I had no idea which one I'd left it in hours earlier. Once back to the Kremlin, hit the double switches on either side of the computer desk using Karn, and either Kenzo or Matlock firing the pop gun over their shoulder to get access to the central computer. However, turns out the game won't let me, fully going into glitch mode, and Karn is suddenly nowhere to be found.
Dude, they're right. This game sucks.
Run number 3 coming up. Third time is the charm, as they say, and it certainly seemed that way, as Khan finally showed back up after reloading an old save, and he subsequently uncovers even more of what's been going on behind the scenes.
There's a message here, sent months ago. It's for me. Okay, people. I've received a message from the underground, the resistance. With all we've been through together, I reckon it's time to come clean. Judith and me joined up with the underground 5 years back. I've been undermining Earth Control's operations from the inside. I don't know how much you've learned or guessed about the Thule program, but what I've seen up here confirms what a lot of people thought. Thule is a program of psionic warfare, and the experiences the Vita Base crew reported convinced Allenby that Mars was the source of an ancient psychic power. If that power were harnessed, it could be used as a weapon against potential enemies.
So, turns out there's a lot more going on here than we initially thought. From the Kremlin, we're off to get the flare gun, an essential item, and the only weapon strong enough to take down a trimorph in the game. By this stage, however, the game keeps glitching out more and more, and another crash seems almost imminent at this point. We persevere on regardless, heading off to get the flare gun in Airlock 2, past Med Bay. A trimorph is protecting the airlock, and the solution is to try and lure the trimorph out, and using the nearby Med Bay alcove, run in behind it once it rushes past. However, this didn't happen as we finally ran into our third and final game-ending bug. No matter what I tried here or how many different reloads I did, the trimorph either wouldn't appear or wouldn't move. An extremely frustrating development, especially seeing as the flare gun is essential for getting down to the lower levels. So here we are, almost at the 3/4 mark of a game that I can't physically sit through for a fourth playthrough, based on the slim hope that it might actually work this time. And to be honest, even it did, would still no doubt break down 10 minutes later, just like it did during my second and third attempts. I really wanted to like this game, and at times I did. I wanted to fight my way down to the necropolis, take on the alien queen, and see the result of all of Karn and company's efforts. But at the end of the day, this game is such a mechanical mess it's almost impossible to get to that point, at least for me. So in conclusion, while I really wanted to like Martian Gothic Unification, and there are definitely some bright moments in this game, no question, it just makes itself so damn hard to like, that probably the best way to sum up this game is just a huge missed opportunity on the part of the developers that they were unable to deliver a competent game on top of what was a great story. Resident Evil in space should have been an absolute money printer, and while I understand that its release window was never going to be favorable up against the might of the PlayStation 2, the controls, inventory management, at times insane puzzle design, as well as the game-breaking glitches, definitely didn't do the game any favors, dragging the whole experience down into one of almost constant frustration. Despite this, however, the strong premise of Martian Gothic, a name it really should have stuck with, instead of the completely unnecessary Unification add-on which, according to Stephen Marley, was inserted in because it was one of the developers' favorite episodes of Star Trek.
Loser.
Martian Gothic nevertheless left a strong enough legacy that future games in the genre would borrow heavily off it, most notably Dead Space, with its mind-controlling alien markers, necromorphs instead of trimorphs, and a claustrophobic abandoned base atmosphere that has one of the main player characters searching for a lost loved one on board, eerily similar to Isaac Clarke's journey on the Ishimura. However, while the bones of a story might already have been there for Dead Space to borrow from down the line, it still no doubt added to it immensely on its own, outshining its 32-bit predecessor with better controls, visuals and puzzle design, with Isaac Clarke's journey being a relative pleasure to play through compared with the clunky execution and gameplay mechanics of Martian Gothic Unification. That said, and mainly because I don't want to end this review on a downer, when it is at its best, very few games offer the immersion, suspense, and story arc of Martian Gothic Unification, with its impressive plot design and written dialogue being a particular highlight. It's just a shame that the actual game mechanics and failure to fully move away from its point-and-click roots ruined the overall experience. Martian Gothic Unification sold incredibly poorly for the PlayStation 1, with just 40,000 units selling in PAL regions, and 60,000 in the US, sales figures that were to be somewhat expected given the tough time of release for this game, not only coming at the end of the PS1's life cycle, but also in the same month as Devil May Cry, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, and the all-conquering Grand Theft Auto 3 on the PlayStation 2. While hardcore fans continue to hold out some hope of a re-release of this classic title on sites such as GOG, coming in at just 344 votes currently on their Dreamlist page, over 25% less than Hotel Dusk. Room 215, so I'm guessing fans of Martian Gothic Unification may have to wait quite some time yet before Karn, Kenzo, and Matlock suit up for their mission to Mars. As always, thanks for watching and taking the time to like the video. It's always appreciated. And until next time, remember to keep it random.